The laugh landed before I finished the sentence. 10%. That was all I asked for. And the sound bounced once off the glass walls and died somewhere behind the CEO's monitor. Her eyes never lifted. Fingers kept moving. The cursor blinked like it was impatient with me. At your age, she murmured, still typing. Maybe it's time for early retirement. No pause, no follow-up, no invitation to respond. I stood there longer than I should have, waiting for something that never came. A nod, a glance. Anything that would confirm this was a conversation and not a dismissal. The silence answered for her. I pushed the folder back under my arm and stepped away from the desk. The chair didn't scrape. I made sure of that. The elevator lobby felt farther than usual. Fluorescent lights. Carpet too clean. When I tapped my badge, the reader flashed red. I tried again. Red. My phone vibrated before I could process it. Your administrative signing privileges have been revoked. Another vibration followed immediately. IP ownership review scheduled. Your confirmation required. My name is Marianne Cole. I am 48 years old. The thought hit me as I stood there with my badge pressed uselessly against the reader. Heat crawling up my neck. The realization sliding into place with an awful calm. This wasn't about a raise. It never was. I took the stairs down, counting each step without meaning to, the way you do when you're trying not to react. By the time I reached the lobby, the calm had hardened into something sharper. They had moved before I walked into that office. They had decided before I opened my mouth. Outside, the air was cold and wet. Seattle always smells like rain right before it starts. My phone buzzed again. An internal calendar invite this time. IP transfer final review. Mandatory attendance. Friday morning. They needed my signature, not my experience, not my loyalty, just my name on the line. I leaned against the building and let the noise of traffic swallow the urge to march back upstairs. If they stripped my authority before I even spoke, what exactly were they trying to lock down? A brief note here, before I move on. This story is a work created by the writing team at Her Fear. I straightened, slid the phone into my pocket, and walked toward the street without looking back at the glass tower. Whatever they thought they had already erased, it wasn't finished. The moment I got home, I opened my laptop instead of taking off my coat. No login banner, no company splash screen, just my desktop. The same one I'd used for years after hours, long after everyone else stopped pretending they cared. I pulled up the private repository without thinking. Fingers moving on muscle memory. The core security module loaded clean. No warnings, no locks, no corporate watermark. I scrolled. Commit history stretched back years. Late nights, weekends, quick fixes I never billed. Optimizations I tested on my own hardware because procurement took too long and someone always needed an answer by Monday morning. I remembered exactly where I was when each line went in. I remembered which problems no one else wanted to touch. My phone buzzed on the desk. Legal's been asking about your module. A message from Derek in infrastructure read, "No greeting, just that." I typed back a single word. Why? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. They're doing an ownership sweep. He finally sent standard stuff. Standard? That word again. I opened the employment folder I kept out of habit. Not paranoia. Offer letter. Amendments. Policy updates I'd skimmed and signed. I searched for the clause they would need. Assignment of inventions. Transfer of intellectual property. Anything with my name next to a date. Nothing. I leaned back, the chair creaking under the shift. The company's flagship product ran on this module. Every client demo, every contract renewal, every promise about security and reliability traced back to code written on this machine. Another message came in. This one from legal. Subject line only. Quick question. I didn't open it. They had assumed. That was the mistake. Assumed loyalty meant ownership. Assumed I wouldn't notice the timing. Assumed I would sign whatever they put in front of me because that's what I had always done. How dangerous is a company built on something it doesn't legally own? The phone vibrated again. Longer this time. A calendar alert slid across the screen. Mandatory review. Friday morning. Attendance locked. I closed the laptop without saving anything new and stood there, listening to the silence settle. Whatever they were rushing to finalize, it wasn't for my benefit, and whatever they thought they could secure with one signature, they were running out of time. The email arrived just after lunch, slipping into my inbox like it belonged there. Final IP transfer approval, pending signature, no greeting, no explanation, just my name in the recipient line and a block of legal language below it. Dense enough to blur if you stared too long. I didn't open the attachment right away. I hovered over the sender instead. Legal operations. Internal. Meant for someone who was still trusted. My phone buzzed before I could decide. You free for a quick sync. It was Kara from Product. Her message clipped, cautious. About what? Knowledge transfer. They moved it up. I checked my calendar. The meeting that had been scheduled for next week now sat on tomorrow morning. Locked and non-optional. I opened the attachment. Signature line at the bottom. My name already filled in. Date field empty. Waiting. The language above it wasn't new. It was polished, final. Written by people who had already decided how this ended. Once I signed, the module would be clean, portable. The company would own it outright, and I would become unnecessary overnight. A new message popped up, this time from legal. Just a formality. It read, "We need this finalized before end of week. Formality." That word again. I typed a response, deleted it, typed another. Nothing I wrote sounded neutral enough. Everything felt like an admission. I closed the document and leaned back, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds until my breathing slowed. Was I about to sign away 16 years of my life? The chat window blinked. Kara again. They're asking if you can walk the team through the architecture tomorrow. She wrote, all of it. Of course they were. I replied with a single line. I'll be there. Then I forwarded the email to my personal address and shut the laptop. If they wanted my signature, they were going to have to wait. And if they thought keeping me around meant I hadn't noticed the trap, they were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. I waited until the office lights dimmed before making the call, not out of caution, out of instinct. Some conversations don't belong under fluorescent lights. The line connected on the third ring. This is Alex. I didn't ask if he had a minute. I didn't explain who I was. If he had taken this call, he already knew. If I own the core module your competitors keep selling as their own, I said, keeping my voice steady. What is it worth to you? Silence stretched. Thin and deliberate, I imagined him leaning back, checking the door, deciding how honest he could afford to be. You're asking the wrong question. He finally said, what you should be asking is how long we've known it wasn't theirs. That landed harder than I expected. You've been watching, I replied. For over a year. We just didn't think you were ready to notice. Ready. As if this was a test I'd finally passed. I shifted the phone to my other hand. This isn't a resume call. No, he agreed. It's not. He didn't ask about my availability. Didn't ask why I was leaving. He asked about access, documentation, proof. He asked which parts were clean and which parts were already tangled up in internal dependencies. You'd need it fast, he said. Before they finalize whatever they're trying to push through, they've set a deadline. Of course they have. The calm in his voice wasn't reassuring. It was precise. Controlled. Like someone who had already run this scenario in his head and liked the outcome. What if I was never trapped, just underestimated? I'm not interested in drama. I said, I want terms, clear ones. You'll get them, he answered. But understand this. Once you move, there's no quiet version of what comes next. I'm not looking for quiet. Another pause. Shorter this time. Come in tomorrow morning, he said. Bring nothing company issued. The call ended before I could respond. I set the phone down and stared at it for a moment, the weight of the decision settling in. Tomorrow morning. Before the knowledge transfer, before the signature, whatever they thought they were locking down on Friday. I was about to change the timeline. They didn't waste time easing into it. A folder slid across the table and stopped just short of my hands. No logo on the cover, no pleasantries either. That's the internal valuation, Alex said, tapping the corner once. Conservative. I opened it. $107 million. The number sat there, clean and unreal, attached to a block of text labeled Core Dependency. My dependency. The module they'd all treated like background noise until it became the only thing that mattered. You built the spine, he continued. Everything else hangs off it. I didn't look up. And the offer, triple your current salary, full patent credit, clean acquisition of the intellectual property, in your name first, then transferred properly. Properly. The word carried weight now. I flipped the page. There it was. The condition. Bolded. Underlined. The timing wasn't subtle. We need the code before Friday, he said. Before they finish whatever paperwork they're pushing at you, they're asking for my signature. I replied, final approval. His mouth tightened, just slightly. Then they think they already won. The room felt smaller, not because of pressure, but because the math had become simple. The laugh in that office, the badge that stopped working, the form waiting for my name. She had laughed because she thought I had no leverage. She thought the raise was the conversation. What happens when the thing keeping your company alive turns out to be optional? I'm not interested in dragging this out, I said. If I do this, I do it clean. That's the only way we do it. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. Not in refusal, in control. I'll have what you need, I said, but not after Friday. He nodded once. No smile. No handshake. Good, he replied. Because once that signature hits their system, this number stops meaning anything. I stood, already feeling the clock speed up. Knowledge transfer in the morning? Legal waiting on my confirmation. A company assuming my compliance. They were counting on one more quiet day. I sent the resignation from my desk instead of HR. Short, clean. Effective immediately after notice. The confirmation pinged back before I could change my mind. A minute later, my phone lit up with an internal call request I hadn't seen in years. The glass office door was already open when I arrived. She was standing this time, one hand braced on the desk, the other gripping her phone like it might betray her. You can't leave. The words came out sharp, clipped. Nothing like the laugh from earlier in the week. We already have an understanding. I didn't sit. I didn't offer anything back. I slid the folder onto the desk and stopped it with 2 fingers. Show me where I gave you my code. Her mouth opened, closed. She reached for the folder anyway, flipping pages too fast, eyes scanning for something she expected to find. The confidence drained by the second. That's not how this works. She tried. You were employed here. You used company resources. I didn't. I replied, keeping my hand still. And legal knows it. Silence pressed in. She leaned back, crossing her arms, recalibrating. This wasn't anger. This was math. We can fix this, she said. We can talk numbers. You already did. I answered. You laughed. Her jaw tightened. The phone buzzed on her desk. She ignored it. Don't do this, yes, she said. You'll burn bridges. What happens when the person you underestimated turns out to be the only one holding the keys? I'm not burning anything, I said. I'm taking what's mine. She reached for the phone again, then stopped. As if calling legal might make things worse. It probably would. I'll need time, she said. You don't have it. I turned for the door before she could recover. Behind me, papers rustled. A chair scraped. Someone losing ground they hadn't realized they were standing on. By the time I stepped back into the hall, the calendar alert buzzed on my phone. Knowledge transfer. Starting in 20 minutes. I didn't slow down. She called me back less than an hour later. Not through the assistant. Not through HR direct line. The kind she never used unless something was already breaking. The office looked the same, but the balance inside it had shifted. She stayed standing, pacing now, not bothering to pretend she was calm. Sit, she said, then waved it off when I didn't move. Fine. Listen, a folder hit the desk, heavier than the last one. Thicker. Desperate. 20% raise. She started. Immediate. Vice president title. Equity. The words came fast, stacked on top of each other like sandbags against a flood. This fixes everything, she added. We announce it together. Clean story, no fallout. I glanced at the folder but didn't open it. If you'd said this morning, I told her, already turning slightly toward the door, I'd still be here. Her pacing stopped. That landed. You're making this personal. You did that. I answered. When you laughed, her phone buzzed again. She didn't ignore it this time. She checked the screen, swiped a message away, then another. Her jaw tightened with each one. The board has questions, she said carefully. Routine questions. About ownership, about assumptions, about why legal couldn't produce a signed transfer with my name on it. How do you stop a collapse once it's in motion? We can still control this, she said. If you stay, control what? I asked. The story or the damage? She exhaled hard, rubbing her temple. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand exactly what I'm doing. Another buzz. This time she didn't hide the screen when it lit up. Board chair? Urgent. She looked at me like I was a variable she'd failed to model. Think carefully, she said. Once you walk out, this won't slow down. I stepped closer, just enough to make her lean back. It already hasn't. I left her there with the folder untouched, the phone vibrating in her hand, and the first real silence I'd felt in that building in years, the kind that comes right before people start asking the wrong questions. The first call came from a number I hadn't seen in years. We need clarification. The voice on the other end said, skipping greetings, specifically about ownership. I didn't ask which ownership. I didn't need to. They're requesting an audit. He continued. Full chain. Who wrote what? When? On whose equipment? I assumed that was already documented. A pause. Too long. So did we. By noon, the messages stacked up. Short, tense, carefully worded, performance metrics slipping, security alerts triggering where they hadn't before. The module still ran, but without oversight, it hesitated. Small delays, missed handoffs, the kind no one notices until clients do. Another call cut in. This one sharper. Your replacement doesn't understand the dependencies. A client snapped. We're seeing instability. He wasn't trained on the architecture. I said, that's becoming obvious. Across town, my phone lit up with a link from Alex. No message, just a launch announcement. The Rivals platform went live that morning. Same core, cleaned, faster. My name listed under lead architecture, right where it should have been all along. Not buried, not implied. Public. The CEO's number flashed next. I let it ring. A new message followed instead. Not from her. From legal. We need to talk. Urgently. What happens when the truth shows up before the press does? I closed the notification without responding. Another alert replaced it seconds later. Board meeting moved up. Emergency session. Attendance mandatory. The calls didn't stop. Clients wanted guarantees. Sales wanted talking points. Legal wanted silence. The CEO wanted time. She didn't have it. I forwarded the audit request to Alex and stood up from my desk. If the board was finally asking questions, they were about to find out how much of their confidence had been built on assumptions. And once those assumptions were exposed, there would be no way to put them back where they came from. The board meeting didn't include me, but my name came up anyway. I knew because my phone kept vibrating with messages that stopped just short of accusations. We didn't realize how exposed this was. No one flagged the ownership gap. We assumed it had been handled years ago. Assumed. That word again. By the afternoon, the CEO was gone. No announcement. No farewell email. Just a quiet update to the org chart and a calendar block that vanished. When someone forwarded me the internal notice, it was 3 lines long and carefully neutral. Leadership transition effective immediately. The stock dipped before lunch and kept sliding after. Not a crash, a steady bleed, enough to make analysts nervous without causing panic. The kind of drop that invites predators. A call came in from someone on the board I barely knew. This didn't have to happen, he said, voice tight. There were other options. Name one. I replied. Silence stretched. Then a sigh. We should have verified ownership, he admitted. We took it on faith. Does winning ever come without consequences? Another message followed. This one forwarded from legal acquisition interest. Early talks, confidential. The company I'd helped build was being priced like a distressed asset, stripped down to what could still be salvaged. Later, a former colleague cornered me in the lobby. People think you planned this, she said. Not accusing, not defending, just stating it. They think you wanted it to burn. I wanted my work recognized. I answered. Everything else came with it. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't know whether to believe me. By evening, the blame had settled into a shape everyone could live with. Not public, not loud, just enough to redirect anger away from the people who had signed off without checking. I sat alone at my desk and watched the last update roll in. Acquisition talks moving forward. Timeline aggressive. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was efficient, quiet, and final. And as the building around me emptied out, one thing became clear: this story wasn't over yet. The offer came through clean and final. Alex didn't dress it up. He slid the paperwork across the table and waited while I read. Triple my previous salary. My name on the patents. A new architecture division reporting directly to me. No hedging language. No fine print that assumed silence. You lead, he said. We back it. I signed once. My signature looked steadier than it had in years. The next call I took was shorter. A board member from my old company. Voice tight. Careful with every word. We're finalizing the acquisition, he said. Effective within months. Who's taking over, I asked. A pause. Then a name that wasn't hers. That's all I needed. I hung up and let the quiet sit. Not relief. Not celebration. Just the absence of pressure I'd learned to live with for too long. Later that week, my phone buzzed with a message I didn't expect. The former CEO. One line. You didn't have to do it this way. I typed back and deleted it. Typed again. I did. At the new office, the team waited for direction instead of permission. They asked real questions. They listened. When my name appeared on the patent filings, no one pretended it had always been that way. It was acknowledged. Out loud. Early retirement. It turned out. Didn't mean disappearing. It meant stepping out of a place that benefited from my silence and into one that didn't require it. Here's the lesson I earned the hard way: if you don't draw a line around your work and your worth, someone else will draw it for you. And it will always be smaller than it should be. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. I know these stories hit close to home for a lot of people. If something here felt familiar, or if you faced a moment where you had to choose between comfort and self-respect, I'd like to hear about it. Leave a comment. And if you want more stories like this, you know where to find them.